Welcome to the Student Affairs One Thing, a podcast that asks a simple question of seasoned student affairs professionals. What is one thing you have learned that has helped shape your professional career? I'm your host, Stuart Brown, the developer of studentaffairs.com, one of the most accessed websites by student affairs professionals. On our pages, we have the most cost-effective job posting board, listing hundreds of open student services positions and a wide range of webinars. On today's episode, I am very pleased to have Dr. Gourjoine M, Vice President of Student Affairs at Texas Lutheran University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to chit-chat with you today.
So, Gourjoine, what is your one thing?
For me, it has been realizing that the power of social media is so much more prevalent now than I think anybody ever thought it could be in regards to how we impact, serve, and support our students. So that's been my one thing, that social media and all its different avenues has really been a powerful tool for us to help our students.
Is there a story behind that one thing where social media, you realized that it is so important and so effective and so powerful?
That's a great question. So I will reflect back a few years on Instagram. I was working in housing and res life, and we would always send these emails to students, and we would always knock on doors, that whole traditional model of connecting with students in those spaces. And the response rate was just kind of hit or miss. I was on Instagram in a personal capacity, really didn't engage with students much there, but I had a student that tracked me down there and sent a message and say, "Hey, I got a note on my door. Can you answer this for me? Because I'm confused." And it kind of set out this light bulb moment there. It was like, if this is an opportunity for us to open additional doors of engagement and connection with students, then why don't we kind of take it to the next level? So that, for me, that's when it was like an aha. So it started there. And I haven't looked back since, but I think it's a tool that if we use it right, it really does support student success. So it's something I think we all, as far as colleagues in our profession, should do better about connecting with students.
I always find that social media, Instagram, now TikTok, a lot of administrators are afraid of it because they don't really know what it's about and really how to harness the power behind it.
I would agree. I think it's a very delicate balancing act. I see a lot of colleagues that will talk behind the scenes and say they want to do those things. I think that the landscape that we're dealing with now makes it very tricky, where some folks are like, I don't want to deal with it, where others are like, I'm going to go full-fledged in, and they make it part of their brand. But I think ultimately it comes back to the core essence of what do we use it for, right? How do we find additional avenues to engage and support students and parents and family members as well? So I think it's an opportunity to shoot our shot, and we just see how it goes.
When you were developing your social media abilities, was this something that you were doing on your own? Did you have other colleagues or even undergraduates that pull you aside, or that you pulled them aside and say, hey, can you kind of help me with this?
Yes. In the initial phases, it was just me trying to figure it out as best as I could. Don't know if I always did it right. But as it kind of established itself, it became a positive tool. Other colleagues kind of caught on, and you saw there was like this network of student affairs, higher ed pros that were using this medium to engage with students. And then it became a community almost. I also want to shout out Dr. Josie Alquist, who kind of pulled some of us together in a space to say, how can we kind of cultivate this and make it into something more than what it is? So I want to shout out her. But it's a lot of folks in our world who are doing that work, who start from the bottom and out of here, so to speak. And I think it's really helped.
So if you have colleagues listening to this and they're scratching their heads about how to get started, what would you give them as advice?
I think the first step is to kind of assess the landscape, to know your audience, your institutional audience. Some schools, their students are heavy social media users. Other schools, it's kind of hit and miss, I would think. Some institutions, they're big in the Twitter world. That's where their students engage in. Others, it's Instagram. So I think you've got to know your landscape and then carve out that lane, have a conversation with leadership, depending on what your role is, to say, hey, what's your feeling of comfort with me kind of using this medium to work with our students, and making sure you establish some very clear ground rules on what that's going to look like. Because some institutional leaders, they frown upon it. They don't want their leaders out there representing the institution in those mediums. So I think you've really got to know your landscape, establish some ground rules. And then if you've got a good foundation of support from there, then you just jump in and then let the natural essence of who you are flow through social media.
You mentioned that you had that aha moment in Res Life when a student contacted you about that flyer that was taped to their door. Mm-hmm. Has there been a more recent episode where you really felt the power of social media from whatever type of resource it was? Again, Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah, for me, it's been an ongoing affirmation of what this can be. At my current institution, I've had a lot of students that will reach out via DM and say, hey, can I come by your office? I just want to meet you. I saw you on Instagram, want to know if I can come by. They come into the space, we make that connection. We pull back the layers of how can I continue to support? How can I connect them to additional layers of support at the institution? And they will usually leave the conversation and say, hey, I think it's kind of cool that we can kind of find and connect with you where we are. So for me, that's that additional keep doing it moment, because sometimes it can be a lot, especially if it's established and students seek you out in that avenue. So you've got to continue to stay present in that space. I've got a colleague I want to shout out again, Dr. Gabe Willis. I think Gabe does a tremendous job of using multiple platforms to navigate student support. He does it really, really well. But I think once we're in that, you can't really turn it off, because then you create that void. And again, it comes back that we're doing it for students, so you got to stay present.
It must also be a balancing act, because you're now giving students that direct access, and you can't just turn them off because they're reaching out in a platform that they feel comfortable with.
You're right. You can't turn it off. And it's about balance. For me, I try to use it two ways. I try to use it to humanize the role, and colleagues see that, even at my level as an executive on a campus, I can be accessible and flexible to the needs of my students in the social media atmosphere. But also have a wife, I have kids, we go out, we do stuff like real people. We actually go shopping and we go to restaurants and we have fun. So I think that allows also a level of vulnerability to come down where people feel like you're approachable, and that helps us do the work that we need to do. So I would agree with you. It is a balancing act. I think once you get into a good rhythm of what it looks like, and you carve out whether that's going to look the same for Instagram versus what it looks like on Facebook, then I think from there it can really work.
Gourjoine, I want to thank you for sharing your one thing. In today's world, it's kind of hard to ignore social media. And like you said, we're always trying to reach out to the students. What's the best way to reach out? And for a lot of them, it is social media. So we really need to adopt it to further the needs of various offices and for the institution. You have been listening to the Student Affairs One Thing, a podcast that asks a simple question of seasoned student affairs professionals. What is one thing you have learned that has helped shape your professional career? I want to thank today's guest, Dr. Gourjoine Wade, Vice President of Student Affairs at Texas Lutheran University. I've been your host, Stuart Brown, the developer of studentaffairs.com, one of the most accessed websites by student affairs professionals. I hope you will join us next time for another episode of the Student Affairs One Thing.